everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Lau and I'm an educational neuroscientist. Today we're going to talk about learning styles and why they may or may not be useful in schools. If you are an 80s kid like me, then chances are you've probably taken some kind of learning style tests in school to figure out what kind of learner you are. I remember my teacher came in one morning and gave us this short multiple choice quiz. Then, depending on our final score, we were divided into three groups: the visual learners, the auditory learners, and the kinesthetic learners. We were told that the visual learners learn best when we are using visual aids like pictures and charts and graphs, and auditory learners learn best from listening to stories and lectures. The kinesthetic learners learned best through hands-on activities and movement. I remember I was sorted into the visual learner group, and I remember completely changing the way I take notes. So instead of writing down whatever the teacher said during class, I would draw pictures and diagrams and draw arrows connecting one point to another. And at that time, I thought I was hacking my brain by changing the way I study. And it was true. By drawing pictures and diagrams, I was able to remember some notes more clearly. So, if learning styles work, why aren't we teaching kids based on their specific learning styles? Well, that's because there actually isn't very much evidence that teaching students using their preferred learning style can help them learn better. Even though there are some neuroimaging studies that have shown when visual learners were engaged with visual learning content like graphs and charts, they tend to have increased brain activity in the occipital area, and that's the part of the brain that is responsible for processing visual information. Similarly, when auditory learners were listening to spoken instructions, they engage parts of their brains that are responsible for auditory cues, and they also tend to perform better on memory tasks when they were given the instructions orally. But these studies were heavily criticized because the results were only seen under a highly controlled environment. So when researchers looked at hundreds of university students in their normal learning environment outside of the lab, they didn't see the same benefits as the other studies did that were done in a strict lab environment. In fact, students who were taught in the learning styles they preferred didn't actually do any better than students who were taught in another learning style. So, does that mean the whole idea of learning styles is absolutely useless? Well, not necessarily. If you can identify what learning styles you're most comfortable with, it can actually really help with memorizing information and understanding a topic. So for example, if you are more comfortable with visual cues, it might be beneficial for you to take notes using a color-coded scheme or with diagrams, so that when you study, certain ideas will pop out at you visually and help you draw connections between them. If you are an auditory learner, maybe it's good to record lectures and listen to them multiple times after class so that you can learn to summarize and develop a cohesive story from the lectures. And if you are a kinesthetic learner, maybe engaging in hands-on activities like using an abacus might help you build the muscle memory for algebraic calculations. So learning styles may not be beneficial in classroom settings, but it could have its advantages in personalized learning environments, like when you're studying alone, or even in EdTech. I'm hopeful that learning apps will be able to provide personalized learning in a way that can identify what types of learning activities engage and motivate you best, and then tailoring these lessons so that you can get the best out of them. I think it's important to understand the purpose of learning styles and incorporate them in a way that is beneficial to students, not just blindly following the idea at face value. So what this means is we all have our unique preferences when it comes to learning, but it doesn't mean that that's the only way we can learn. We're not limited to benefiting from just one learning style, and depending on the subject, it might be helpful to be exposed to different methods of learning. For example, while I used to identify myself as a visual learner, it didn't mean that I couldn't learn effectively using other methods. So I remember having trouble learning how to swing a badminton racket properly. And I had watched my teacher and other players swing the rackets and hitting the bird perfectly across the net. And I was even able to visualize how my arm and my wrist were supposed to move, but it really wasn't until I practiced throwing the bird over the net that I realized that the muscle movement between throwing and swinging the racket are very similar. And this type of hands-on kinesthetic activity helped me draw connections and develop the muscle memory for subjects that are traditionally not so easy to visualize. So that's why a more effective way of learning is something called multimodal learning. Instead of learning a topic using only our preferred style, we also allow ourselves to learn about this topic through a variety of methods. So for example, teaching a second language to a visual learner might be helpful if we link new words to their meanings through visual activities like matching a word to the corresponding picture. But just knowing the meaning of new words isn't enough. We also need to develop a phonetic relationship between the written word and the spoken sounds in order to learn how to pronounce the words properly. We also need to practice using the words in a real-life social setting, like learning how to order food at a restaurant. A combination of methods is a more comprehensive way of learning, regardless of what style of learner you are. So the moral of the story is, you can identify a learning style that you like, and that's especially useful in personalized learning environments, like when you're studying at home for a test, or when you're using a learning app. But incorporating a variety of learning methods is a much more effective way of learning a new topic, especially in a classroom setting. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.